You've arrived just in time. The fire has only just flared up properly. Shake the raindrops from your cloak and hang it closer to the warmth. The tavern is crowded tonight, but there's always a place for you. Ready to listen? The night skies over Gondor were peaceful once more. The stars, long veiled by smoke and shadow, shone bright above the white city. Their silver light bathed the high towers of Minas Tirith, glinting on the marble domes and the banner of the king that fluttered softly in the wind. It was said that never since the elder days had the land known such peace. The Dark Lord was gone, his armies scattered, and the land of Mordor lay broken and silent beyond the mountains. Yet peace, even in Middle-earth, is like a clear pool, still upon the surface, but deep beneath, strange things may stir. Far to the east, beyond the Ephel-Duath, where the black plains of Gorgoroth stretched out in ruin, there were whispers of smoke rising again. Shepherds of Ithilien, tending their flocks near the Morgai Vale, told of strange lights in the night, and shadows that moved where none should be. Few believed them at first. The king's peace was strong, and the reunited kingdom was wide. But in the high chambers of the citadel, a report reached the steward's hall, smoke seen by many eyes, rising like dark fingers into the pale dawn. And so, by the king's command, a company was gathered, men of Ithilien, rangers seasoned in the wild. At their head rode Elberon, son of Faramir, now warden of Ithilien and captain of the Southern Guard. He was young still, though the wisdom of his father shone in his eyes. With him rode 10 companions, among them Amdir, a quiet man whose courage was of the steadfast kind, one who spoke little, but whose blade had never failed. On the morning of their departure, the White City awoke to a stillness rare in its bustling courts. The king himself, tall and grave, came down from the citadel to meet them. His hair, touched with threads of silver, caught the dawn light, and his voice was low, yet strong. "Ride east, Elberon," said King Elessar. "Go swiftly, and bring back truth, not rumor. If the shadow stirs again in that accursed land, we must know its shape before it grows." Elberon bowed. "We shall return with the truth, my lord, or not at all." The company rode through the gates of Minas Tirith, their cloaks of green and silver streaming behind them. They passed through the Pelennor fields, where spring grass now grew tall among the ancient mounds of the fallen. They crossed the Anduin by the bridge of Osgiliath, where the ruins gleamed like bones in the sun, and the river whispered against the stones. By nightfall they reached Ithilien, the fair land between river and mountain, long scarred by war, but blooming once more beneath the care of its people. Here Elberon's heart was lightened. He had grown among these woods, and every tree and stream seemed to greet him as an old friend. But even here, where birds sang and clear waters ran, there was unease among the folk. Amdir rode beside him as they passed through a narrow glen, where the scent of wild thyme filled the air. "The smoke was seen from here, my lord," he said. "It rose beyond the mountains in the east. Some say it came from Orodruin itself." Elberon's gaze turned toward the horizon, where the dark peaks of the Ephel-Duath loomed like teeth against the sky. "Mount Doom has long been silent," he murmured. "If fire wakes there again, we must learn why." They camped that night beside the ruins of a watchtower built by Gondor of old. The stones were blackened with age, and ivy crept up its sides. The men sat by a small fire, their faces lit with a soft glow. One of them, a scout named Ragnar, spoke in a low voice. "I've heard tales," he said, "of folk who still wander the ashes of Mordor. Not orcs, they're gone, mostly, but men, wild and fierce. They say some were servants of the Eye, and would see his power rise again. Elberon frowned. "Tales are wind," he said. "Yet the wind carries truth, sometimes." Amdir, sitting apart, sharpened his blade in silence. The firelight gleamed on his mail. "If any would raise the shadow anew," he said at last, "they shall find no welcome in this world." At dawn they rode east again, climbing through the passes of the Efelduath. The air grew thin, and the scent of ash lingered faintly on the wind. They passed through Cirith Ungol, where the towers still stood in ruin. Stones lay tumbled where once the watchers had stood, and the gates yawned open, empty and silent. The men rode in silence, for the very ground seemed to remember pain. Amdir's eyes lingered on the black walls as they passed. "It was here that the ring-bearer came," he said softly. "Frodo of the Shire, who bore what none other could." Elberon nodded. "Aye, his courage broke the world's darkness. Let us hope it does not return." Beyond the pass, the land fell away into Mordor. The plains stretched before them, barren and bleak, though green shoots had begun to pierce the ash. Far in the east, a pale column of smoke rose into the sky, thin, wavering, but steady. "There," Elberon said, pointing. "That is our road." The company pressed on, descending into the wasted plain. The sun hung low, a dull red disk behind a veil of mist. The ground was cracked and dry beneath their horses' hooves. All was silent, save the wind, which whispered through the ruins like a voice half-remembered. As night fell, they reached the edge of a ravine, where the ruins of Barad-dûr lay strewn like the bones of some fallen god. The black stones still glimmered faintly with an inner light, as though a memory of fire clung to them. Elberon raised his hand. "We make camp here," he said. "Tomorrow, we search the ruins." Amdir gazed at the dark horizon, his hand resting on his sword hilt. In the distance, the smoke curled upward, twisting into the stars. Something was waiting among the ashes, and it had begun to wake. The dawn came pale and cold over the ruins of Barad-dûr. A grey light spread across the plains, glinting off the jagged stones that jutted from the earth like the ribs of a long-dead beast. The air was still, heavy with the scent of ash and iron. Even the wind seemed to tread lightly in that desolate place, as though wary of waking what had once dwelt there. Elberon stood upon a broken rise of rock, gazing out across the field of ruin. Far and wide, the land bore the scars of the Dark Tower's fall. The foundations of Sauron's fortress had been shattered by fire and thunder, yet its shadow seemed to linger still, clinging to the ground like smoke that would not fade. Behind him, the rangers made ready for the day. Amdir moved among them, silent as always, checking their weapons, tightening girths, and speaking a few quiet words to each man. He had the bearing of one who found calm in purpose. His eyes, grey as storm clouds, missed little. Elberon turned to him. "We'll search the western edge first, look for any sign of life or death. The reports spoke of smoke rising from these ruins. If men dwell here, we shall find them." Amdir nodded, though his gaze lingered on the black stones ahead. "Some things should be left to sleep, my lord. This ground remembers pain." "Perhaps," Elberon said. "But the king commanded us to seek the truth, and truth we shall find." They moved cautiously among the ruins. The earth was split and uneven, and strange fumes still whispered from the cracks. The stones themselves seemed to hum faintly underfoot, as though some echo of the old power still lingered deep below. After an hour's search, Ragnar called out from the far side of the ruin, "Captain, there's something here!" The men gathered around him. He had found the remains of a camp, small but recent. Ashes of a fire still smouldered faintly, and footprints marked the dust. There were signs of tools, chisels, hammers, fragments of worked metal, and a torn piece of black cloth bearing a faint red sigil, a flame within a ring. Elberon crouched beside it, tracing the emblem with his finger. "This is no common mark," he murmured. Amdir knelt beside him. "It is made in the fashion of the old craftsmiths of Mordor, those who served Sauron in the forges beneath his tower. I've seen such symbols carved on blades taken from his hosts." Ragnar looked uneasy. "Then it's true. There are those who still serve his memory." Elberon rose to his feet. "If they are here, we'll find them. They cannot have gone far." They followed the trail eastward, toward the shadow of Mount Doom. The land grew more treacherous as they went, black fissures opening in the ground, thin streams of smoke curling from unseen depths. By mid-afternoon, the sky had darkened, veiled by a dim haze that smelled of burnt stone. Suddenly, from a cleft ahead, a cry rang out, a harsh, echoing sound that sent the company's hands to their swords. They advanced swiftly and found a man lying among the rocks, bound and half-conscious. His clothes were torn, his face blackened with soot. Elberon knelt beside him. "Easy, friend. Who are you?" The man's eyes fluttered open, dark eyes, filled with both fear and pride. "You should not have come here," he rasped. The fire lives still." "Who did this to you?" "They call themselves the heirs of Ash," he whispered. "They seek to raise again what was lost, to forge the ring anew." A chill passed through the company. Even the wind seemed to falter. "Where are they?" Elberon demanded. The man tried to lift his hand, pointing toward the smoldering slopes of Orodruin. "Beneath the mountain, in the old tunnels, the fires burn again." His strength failed, and he sank back. Elberon called for water, but before they could aid him, the man's body convulsed, and he went still. His eyes stared upward, glassy and unseeing. Upon his chest lay a faint mark, as though branded by flame, a ring of fire. They buried him among the stones and set a cairn above the grave. None spoke for a time. At last, Amdir said, "If what he told us is true, then we face a foe unlike any we have known. The forging of the great rings was an art lost, even to the wise of old. Who among mortals could hope to repeat it? Perhaps none," Elberon said quietly. "But folly has ever been the seed of evil. If these heirs of Ash believe they can restore the power of the rings, they may yet unleash ruin." That night, they made camp near the base of Mount Doom. The mountain loomed above them, dark and vast against the reddening sky. Now and again, a dull glow flickered near its summit, as if embers still smoldered deep within. As the men sat in silence, Amdir walked apart, his eyes fixed upon the mountain. The air was warmer here, and the ground faintly trembled beneath his boots. He felt, deep in his bones, the echo of a power long quenched but not forgotten. He thought of his father, who had perished in the War of the Ring, one of many who had fought to end the darkness. And he thought of Frodo, the ring-bearer, whose name was spoken still with reverence and awe. That evil should rise again, even in whispers, filled him with quiet fury. Late in the night, when most had slept, a sound came to his ears, the faint ring of hammer upon anvil, carried on the wind. He rose swiftly, scanning the darkness. The sound came from the east, deep beneath the mountain's shadow. "Elberon," he whispered, shaking his captain awake. "Listen." The two men stood still, hearing the rhythmic clang, slow, measured, unmistakable. "By the Valar," Elberon breathed, "the forges of Mordor burn again." When dawn came, red and sullen over the plain, the company set out toward the sound. They followed the faint tremors in the earth until they came upon a deep cleft, an ancient tunnel descending into the mountain's roots. The air that issued from it was hot and foul, reeking of sulphur and smoke. Elberon turned to his men. "We go down," he said. "Keep your blades ready, and your courage steadied. Whatever waits below, it must not be allowed to finish its work." They lit their torches and entered the dark. The passage twisted downward, walls slick with moisture and ash. Far below, the glow of fire flickered, red and alive. And then they heard voices, low, chanting, like the murmur of a dark prayer. The airs of ash were real, and they were already at work. The tunnel plunged deep into the bowels of Orodruin, twisting like a serpent through the stone. The air was thick and choking, filled with the bitter taste of sulphur and ash. The flicker of torchlight painted the walls with wavering gold, revealing scars in the rock where fire had once raged with unholy fury. Every step the company took seemed to echo with the memory of that ancient fire. They moved silently, their boots muffled by the dust of ages. Elberon led the way, his sword drawn and gleaming faintly in the red light. Behind him came Amdir, eyes narrowed, every sense alert. The others followed close, their faces grim. None spoke, for speech seemed a trespass in that place. At last, the passage opened into a vast cavern, an ancient chamber hewn from the mountain's heart. The walls glowed faintly, veins of molten stone running like blood beneath their surface. At its center stood a great forge, blackened but not dead. Around it burned 6 smaller fires, and the air rang with the clang of hammers. Figures moved in the red gloom, men, cloaked in black and ash-grey, their faces hidden by masks of iron. Their hammers rose and fell in a slow rhythm, shaping something upon the anvil. The sound was heavy, measured, like the beating of a monstrous heart. Elberon motioned for his men to hold. They crouched among the rocks, watching. Amdir's gaze fixed on the object they were crafting. Upon the anvil lay a ring, not complete, but already gleaming with a strange, dark light. It was wrought of black steel, laced with veins of gold, and its surface shimmered as though alive. Then a voice rose above the ringing hammers, clear and cold, yet strangely beautiful. A woman stepped from the shadows. Her hair was black as night, her eyes bright as coals. She wore a mantle of crimson that glowed like living fire. "Morgulwen," Amdir breathed, barely audible. He had heard her name whispered in old tales, a sorceress of Mordor, once apprenticed to the forge masters of Gorthor the Cruel. After Sauron's fall, she had vanished into the east, her fate unknown. Until now. The sorceress lifted her hands, and the fire at the forge leapt higher. Her voice filled the cavern, echoing off the walls like a dark chant. Fire remembers, ash remembers, and from ruin we shall rise. The servants of the Eye are scattered, but his gift endures. By flame and blood I summon the lost craft. Let the ring be reborn. Elberon's hand tightened on his sword hilt. "By the Valar," he whispered, "she means to reforge one of the 9. Ragnar turned to him, face pale in the red light. "If that comes to pass, Gondor will fall again. We must strike now." Elberon hesitated only a moment. "Amdir, take 4 men and circle to the right. We'll come from the front. When I give the word, strike." Amdir nodded and slipped away, moving like a shadow along the cavern wall. The heat grew stronger the deeper he went, searing his lungs. Yet he did not falter. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, and his heart beat steady as a drum. When he reached the far side of the chamber, he saw Morgulwen raise the ring high above the forge. The fires roared, blazing white-hot. The metal glowed, then pulsed with a dull crimson light. The forgers knelt around her, chanting in the black tongue. Amdir could wait no longer. He caught Elberon's eye across the cavern. The captain raised his hand and gave the signal. Steel flashed, and the silence shattered. The rangers leapt from the shadows, their battle cry echoing through the cavern. Arrows flew, striking down 2 of the forgers before they could react. Elberon charged straight for the forge, his sword gleaming like lightning in the firelight. The heirs of Ash fought fiercely. They drew curved blades of blackened steel, their eyes burning with fanatical light. Sparks flew as steel met steel, the clang of battle drowning out the forge's song. Amdir cut down one foe, then another, moving with deadly precision. The air burned around him, and sweat ran down his brow. Yet he pressed on, forcing his way toward the anvil where Morgulwen stood. She turned as he approached, her eyes alight with terrible power. "Foolish man of Gondor," she said, "you cannot stop the fire that never dies." She raised her hand, and flame burst from her palm. Amdir threw himself aside, the fire searing past him in a wave of heat. He rolled to his feet, sword raised. Elberon reached the anvil, just as Morgulwen caught the half-forged ring in her grasp. Its light flared crimson, and the air trembled. "This is the heir of fire," she cried, "born of ruin, bound in will. Even in death, the Lord of Gifts endures." Elberon struck, his blade cleaving through the air. The ring flew from her hand, clattering across the stone floor. It struck the edge of the forge and fell, spinning into the molten pit below. A sound like thunder split the cavern. Flames erupted from the fissures, and the walls shuddered. Morgulwen screamed, a sound not of pain, but of fury. She turned her wrath upon Elberon, hurling a torrent of fire that engulfed the ground at his feet. Amdir sprang forward, shoving his captain clear. The flames struck him instead. He fell to his knees, his cloak ablaze. But still he raised his sword and drove it into the sorceress's side. Her cry echoed through the cavern, mingling with the roar of the fire. For a heartbeat, her form seemed to waver. Then she fell, vanishing into the flames. The forge collapsed with a deafening roar. The roof cracked, and molten rock poured down from above. Elberon caught Amdir under the arm, dragging him toward the tunnel. The others followed, stumbling through the smoke as the mountain shook. They burst into the open air just as the cavern behind them imploded. A blast of heat swept over the plain, and a column of fire rose from the mountain's heart, reaching toward the darkened sky. For a long while, none spoke. The rangers stood amid the ash, watching the glow fade. Elberon knelt beside Amdir, who lay pale and trembling, his tunic scorched. "The ring," Amdir whispered. "It's gone?" "Yes," Elberon said softly. "Into the fire, where it belongs." Amdir smiled faintly. "Then the shadow is ended." But Elberon's eyes turned toward the mountain, where faint embers still glowed among the cracks. "Ended?" he murmured. "Perhaps. Or perhaps only sleeping." Far above, the summit of Mount Doom trembled once more, and a faint sound, like the sigh of some ancient, restless spirit, drifted through the air. The fire had fallen silent, but beneath the ashes it remembered. The sun was low when the company began their journey back across the plains of Gorgoroth. The sky above Mordor burned with the dying light, a deep red that bled into gold along the western rim. The mountain still smoked behind them, its fiery breath rising like a ghost against the fading day. Every man among them bore wounds or weariness, and though they had survived, none spoke of triumph. Elberon rode at the front, his cloak torn and his eyes shadowed with care. Amdir rode behind him, weak from his burns but refusing to be carried. His arm was bound in linen, and his face pale as ash. yet a quiet strength burned still in his gaze. Around them, the rangers moved like men who had walked through nightmare and returned changed. When night fell, they made camp upon the edge of the plain, where the first green shoots of Ithilien reached towards the waste. The stars shone cold and clear above, pure lights untouched by the darkness of the world. The men sat in silence, listening to the wind that whispered faintly through the grasses. Elberon tended the fire, though his thoughts were far away. He saw again the face of the sorceress, Morgulwen, wreathed in flame and fury, and the terrible light of the ring as it fell. She was gone, swallowed by fire, yet her last words echoed still in his mind. Ashes remember fire. He looked to Amdir, who sat apart, staring into the night. "How fares your wound?" Elberon asked quietly. Amdir turned, his smile faint but steady. "The healers in Minas Tirith have seen worse, I think. It burns yet. But I live." Elberon nodded. "You saved my life within that forge. I would have perished had you not struck when you did." "I did what any man would," Amdir replied. "But I wonder, my lord, was it truly ended there? The mountain still smokes. The fire does not sleep forever." "The ring was cast into the fire," said Elberon firmly. "Whatever she meant to create is gone. No craft of mortal hands can bind such power again." Amdir did not answer at once. He lifted his gaze to the east, where faint glimmers of red still burned along the horizon. "Perhaps," he said at last. "But evil seldom dies cleanly. It seeps into the cracks of the world, waiting. What we destroyed may yet leave a mark." For a long time neither spoke. Then, quietly, Elberon said, "We shall return to the king. Gondor must know of this, and the forges of Orodruin must be watched. I will not let that fire awaken again without warning." When dawn came, they broke camp and rode westward. The land changed as they went, the ash giving way to grass, the air sweetening with the scent of green things. Yet even in Ithilien's fair woods, they could not wholly cast off the memory of what they had seen. By the time they reached the Anduin, word had spread ahead of them. Messengers rode swift to Minas Tirith, bearing tidings of their return. And when they crossed the great river, banners flew upon the walls of Osgiliath, and the people came out to greet them, cheering the sons of Gondor who had braved the Shadow's land once more. But Elberon felt no triumph in the welcome. He smiled and bowed as the people hailed them, yet his thoughts were heavy. The victory felt hollow, fragile as frost beneath the sun. That night, they camped beneath the White Tower's shadow. The stars shone bright above, and the air was filled with the sound of the city at peace. For the first time in many days, Elberon slept deeply. Yet his dreams were uneasy. He dreamed of the mountain again, of its heart glowing red, the forges alive once more. And in the dream, he saw Morgulwen standing upon a bridge of stone above the fire, her eyes burning like twin coals. She held out her hand, and from the flame rose the faint shape of a ring, molten and unfinished. Her voice echoed through his dream. "Fire cannot die, it is memory made flesh. You broke the ring, but the will endures." He woke before dawn, his breath ragged, his heart pounding. The chamber was cold, yet he felt sweat upon his brow. He rose and went to the window, where the first light of morning touched the city's white stones. Below him, the guards changed their watch upon the gates, and the sound of their boots on the flagstones steadied his heart. He turned as the door opened softly behind him. Amdir entered, walking with a staff for support. "You dream too, I think," Elberon said quietly. Amdir nodded. "The mountain haunts me still. I hear the sound of hammers when I close my eyes." Elberon looked out toward the east, where the mountains of shadow were faint against the dawn. We may have ended a great evil, he said, but we have stirred something that should have remained still. The king must hear it from our own lips. Later that morning, they stood before King Elisar in the Hall of Kings. The great chamber was filled with morning light, streaming through the high windows onto the black and white stone floor. The king sat upon the throne of Gondor, his face grave as they knelt before him. Elberon spoke first, recounting all that had passed, the smoke seen in the east, the journey through the mountains, the discovery of the heirs of Ash, and the destruction of their forge. The hall was silent as he spoke. When he finished, Aragorn leaned forward, his eyes shadowed with thought. "You did well," the king said at last. "You have done Gondor a great service, yet your tidings are grim indeed. If any sought to remake the Rings of Power, it bodes ill for all free folk." Amdir bowed his head. "The craft may be lost now, my lord. But I fear the desire remains. The woman, Morgulwyn, she spoke of others. I think she was not alone." Aragorn's gaze darkened. "Then we shall see that none such rise again. The lands of Mordor must be watched, and the mountain guarded. The fire that once served darkness shall serve it no more." He rose from the throne and placed a hand upon Elberon's shoulder. "Rest now, son of Faramir. You and your men have faced peril where few would tread. Yet know this, the shadow you fought may yet whisper in the east. The hearts of men are ever drawn to fire." That night, as the city slept beneath a sky bright with stars, Elberon walked alone along the walls of Minas Tirith. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of stone and blossom. Yet when he looked eastward, toward the far-off mountains, he fancied he saw a faint glow upon the horizon, like embers that refused to die. Amdir joined him there, silent for a while. Then he said, "You see it too." Elberon nodded slowly. "Yes, the ashes still breathe." And though the night was calm, both men felt a heaviness settle upon their hearts. The great wars were ended, and peace had come to Middle-earth. But in its quiet heart, beneath the soil and stone, something smouldered still. For evil, though broken, never truly forgets the warmth of its own fire. Weeks passed in Minas Tirith, and though peace returned to the city of the kings, Elberon's heart remained restless. He went about his duties as warden of Ithilien with quiet diligence, meeting with captains, training new rangers, patrolling the woods that bordered the Anduin. But his thoughts ever drifted east. Each dawn, when the sun rose, he would look beyond the river, to where the mountains of Mordor brooded upon the horizon, and a faint unease would stir within him, as if those black peaks watched him in turn. Amdir, though still recovering from his wounds, remained at his side. The healers had done what they could, but the burns upon his arm and shoulder would not fully fade. The skin there bore a strange mark, like a pattern of coiling flame, and though it caused him little pain, it burned faintly in the dark, as if some ember of the mountain's fire yet lived within him. He hid it beneath his cloak and spoke of it to none. One evening, as the two sat upon the balcony of the warden's hall, overlooking the green vales of Ithilien, Amdir spoke quietly. "Do you ever think of her, my lord? Of Morgulwyn?" Elberon's gaze did not waver from the east. "Aye," he said. "Too often. I see her in the forge's light still. There was pride in her, and madness, but also purpose. She believed the ring would be reborn, that fire itself remembered its master. That thought troubles me." Amdir's hand tightened around his cup. "And if she spoke true?" "Then we must be watchful," Elberon answered. "Evil is a patient foe. It does not die, it lingers. A seed buried in ash will wait until the rain comes." Their talk was broken by the sound of hoofbeats. A rider approached from the north, dusty from long travel. The guards at the gate hailed him, and moments later he stood before Elberon, bearing the seal of the king. His message was brief but grave. Reports of strange lights seen in the dead marshes, and of travellers who vanished without trace along the old road to Dagorlad. Elberon frowned as he read. "The marshes," he said softly. "That place has never known peace. Oh, yet if fire stirs there, it may be no simple ghost light." Amdir rose to his feet. "Let me ride with you, my lord. My sword is not yet weary." Elberon studied him a moment, then nodded. "We ride at dawn." The journey north was long and weary. The air grew colder, the land flatter, until the trees of Ithilien gave way to desolate plains and sodden fens. The dead marshes stretched before them like a shroud, a maze of pools and reeds that shimmered faintly under a sunless sky. Pale lights flickered beneath the mist, moving like the souls of the lost. Even the horses grew uneasy, stamping and snorting as they neared the edge of the mire. The stench of stagnant water filled the air, and the wind carried whispers that none could quite discern. "Few dare this place," Amdir murmured as they dismounted. "It was here the great battle was fought, long before our father's time. The ground is thick with the bones of kings and orcs alike." Elberon nodded grimly. "And it was here the ring-bearer once passed, guided by that wretched creature Gollum. The land remembers him still." They moved cautiously among the pools, their boots sinking into the soft earth. The air was thick, heavy with decay. Once or twice, Amdir thought he heard faint sounds, the clink of metal, the crack of stone. But when he turned, there was nothing but mist and shadow. As night fell, they made camp upon a small rise of firm ground. The men kept their fires low, unwilling to draw the gaze of whatever spirits might wander. Amdir took the first watch, standing by the water's edge, his bow in hand. It was then he saw it. A faint red gleam far off among the pools, like a spark drifting beneath the mist. At first he thought it a will-o'-the-wisp, but then it moved, steadily, deliberately, vanishing behind a ridge of reeds, then appearing again farther east. He woke Elberon. "There," he said, pointing. "Do you see it?" Elberon's eyes narrowed. A forge's light, perhaps, or something worse. "We follow it, but with care." They roused a handful of men and crept through the marsh, their steps slow and silent. The glow grew stronger as they went, pulsing faintly, until they came upon a hollow where the water steamed. There, half hidden by reeds and stone, was a fissure in the earth, and from it rose smoke and firelight. They descended cautiously into the crack and found themselves in a shallow cavern. The air was hot, heavy with the scent of burning pitch. Within, a handful of figures worked by the light of crude forges, hammering black metal upon stone anvils. Amdir's breath caught. "Again," he whispered. "They rise again." One of the figures turned, and Elberon's blood ran cold. The man's face was pale, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. Across his brow was branded the same mark they had seen in Mordor, a ring of flame. The man spoke in a rasping voice. "You should not have come here, sons of Gondor. The fire calls and we answer. She lives still, in us." Elberon stepped forward, sword drawn. "Morgulwen is dead, her forge lies in ruin." The man smiled, lips cracked and blackened. "Dead? Perhaps. But fire is not a creature of flesh. It passes from hand to hand, from heart to heart. The heirs of Ash are many. You slew the mother, but the children rise." A cry went up as the forgers seized their weapons, blades of red-hot metal still glowing from the coals. The cavern filled with the hiss of steam and the roar of flame. The rangers fought fiercely, though the footing was treacherous. Sparks flew, and smoke filled the air. Elberon cut down one foe, parried another's blow, and drove his blade through a third. Amdir fought beside him, his injured arm burning with pain. Yet in that heat he felt something stir, a strange strength that lent fire to his strikes. At last the last of the cultists fell, and silence claimed the cavern once more. The forges hissed and guttered out. Elberon wiped his blade clean, breathing hard. "We cannot destroy every shadow," Amdir said softly. "They spread like cinders on the wind." Elberon turned to him, grim. "Then we hunt the wind if we must. The heirs of Ash will find no refuge in the realm of the king." As they climbed from the cavern, the first light of dawn touched the marshes. Mist drifted over the pools, and in its reflection, Amdir thought he saw a face, the face of Morgulwen, faint and distant, watching from beneath the water. Her lips moved in silence, and though no sound reached him, he knew the word she spoke. Fire. He blinked, and she was gone. The morning wind swept through the reeds, carrying the scent of smoke and decay. Behind them, the fissure still smouldered faintly, its glow hidden beneath the earth. The heirs of Ash were not ended. They had merely begun to stir. The return to Ithilien was slow and burdened with thought. Though the fires in the marsh had been quenched and their foes scattered, Elberon knew the victory hollow. For each forge they destroyed, another might smoulder unseen. The cult called itself Heirs of Ash, and their words lingered like the smell of smoke long after battle. Amdir rode in silence beside him, his hood drawn low. He had not spoken much since they left the marshes, and when he did, it was in a voice quiet and strained. Elberon had noticed the change in him, the pale hue of his skin, the way his hand sometimes trembled, as if it felt heat that none else could sense. On the third evening, as they camped upon the high slopes above the Morgulduin, Amdir sat apart from the men, staring into the fire. Its flickering light danced upon his face, and his eyes caught the glow, reflecting it like embers. Elberon came to him and crouched by the flames. "You have been silent since the battle," he said. "Tell me what troubles you." Amdir's gaze did not move from the fire. "When I struck down the last of those men, his blood fell upon me," he murmured. "It burned like molten iron. Since then, I feel as though something stirs within me, something I cannot name. The fire calls to me, Elberon. I hear it in the wind, in the crackle of every flame." Elberon frowned. "You are weary. The fire of that place is poison to the spirit. You must rest." But Amdir shook his head slowly. "No, it is not madness nor fever. It is memory. I see her, Morgulwen, when I close my eyes. She speaks no words, but her gaze is heavy with knowing. She did not die as we thought. Her spirit clings to the ashes, and it hunts still for what was lost." Elberon placed a firm hand upon his shoulder. "If that is true, then we shall find a way to end her shadow. But you must not listen to her whispers. Darkness has many tongues, and none speak truth." Amdir looked up at him then, and for an instant, Elberon thought he saw a faint red glimmer deep within his friend's eyes. He said no more, but when he turned away, unease gripped his heart like frost. By the time they reached the green valleys of Ithilien, word of their deeds had spread once more. Yet the people, though grateful, spoke in hushed voices. Rumor ran ahead of them, rumors of flames seen in the eastern skies, of strange dreams among the folk, and of shadows that crept through the woods at night. Faramir, now old but still wise and keen-eyed, greeted his son in the great hall at Emin Arnon. The firelight gleamed on his silvered hair as he rose to meet them. "You have done what few dared," he said, embracing Elboron. "But I see weariness in your face. What news do you bring from the marshes?" Elboron recounted all, the hidden forge, the cultists' words, and the fire beneath the earth. Faramir listened long without speaking. When the tale was done, he paced to the window and looked eastward, where the mountains stood dark against the dawn. "There is always a remnant," he said softly. "Even Morgoth left seeds of his malice in the hearts of lesser beings. Sauron was his servant and learned well. Perhaps these heirs of ash are but embers of that same evil, still smouldering beneath the dust of years. Then we must quench them utterly," Elboron said. "If they rise again, they may yet find the means to restore what was lost." Faramir turned, his eyes grave. "And what of Amdir? He stands apart from the others. There is a shadow upon him." Elboron hesitated. "He was burned by the fire. It has marked him. But he is loyal still. Be wary," Faramir said. "Fire is a perilous friend. It gives light and warmth, yet devours what it touches. If that flame has taken root within him, it may burn more than he knows." That night, as the moon rose over Ithilien, Amdir wandered alone through the gardens of Emin Arnon. The air was cool, filled with the scent of green leaves and flowing water. Yet he felt no peace. Every flicker of torchlight seemed to whisper his name. Every shadow seemed to breathe. At last he came to a fountain in the courtyard, where a single lamp burned beside the water. He knelt there, gazing into the rippling surface. For a moment it reflected only his face, pale, drawn, weary. Then the image wavered, and another face appeared beneath it. Morgulwen. Her eyes gleamed from the depths like coals in a dying fire. Her voice came faintly, like the hiss of steam. "You carry my gift, Amdir of Ithilien. You took it into your flesh when you struck me down. The flame remembers its master, and now it remembers you." He staggered back, breath catching. "You are dead. You burned in the mountain's heart." "Did I?" she whispered. "The fire does not die. It travels in the blood of those it chooses. You are its vessel now. Through you, the forge will rise again." Amdir shook his head fiercely. "Never. I serve the king. I serve the light." Her laughter rippled through the air, soft and cruel. "Light and fire are one, foolish mortal. You cannot banish what burns within you. When the time comes, you will understand. You will come to me in the ashes." The vision faded. The water stilled. Yet when Amdir looked down, he saw that his hands glowed faintly, the veins beneath his skin pulsing with dim firelight. He clenched them into fists, trembling. He did not sleep that night. The next morning, Elboron found him at the stables, saddling his horse. "Where do you go?" Elboron demanded. "To the east," Amdir said, his voice calm but distant. "I must see for myself whether the mountain truly sleeps." "You cannot go alone." Amdir looked at him, and for the first time there was something strange in his gaze, something old and burning. "This is my burden, Elboron. I feel the fire within me. If I do not master it, it will master me. I must face it, or it will consume all I love." Elboron stepped forward, placing a hand upon his shoulder. "Then I ride with you, as I did before. You shall not face it alone." For a moment, Amdir seemed to hesitate, as though the fire within him flickered uncertainly. Then he nodded. "Very well. But remember this, my friend. If I falter, you must do what must be done." Elboron's eyes hardened. "I will not lose you to the dark." The two rode out at dawn, the rising sun painting the sky with gold and crimson. Behind them, the white city gleamed faint upon the horizon. Before them lay the long road to the mountains, and as they rode, the wind carried a faint scent of smoke, subtle, fleeting, yet unmistakable. The world was quiet, but beneath that stillness something stirred, like breath beneath a shroud. In the east, Mount Doom smouldered again. For 7 days Elberon and Amdir rode eastward through Ithilien, following the old road that led toward the Mountains of Shadow. The land grew wilder with each passing mile. The woods thinned, the air grew dry, and the scent of ash returned to the wind. Though it was spring, no birds sang in those lands, and even the grass seemed dull beneath the pale sun. On the 3rd night, they camped upon a ridge overlooking the Anduin. The great river flowed wide and silent beneath them, gleaming faintly in the starlight. Elberon sat beside the fire, sharpening his sword, while Amdir stared into the flames, unmoving. The light danced upon his face, and again Elberon saw that strange glow deep within his eyes. "You should rest," Elberon said quietly. "You have not slept in days." Amdir did not answer at once. "When I close my eyes, I dream of her," he said at last. "Morgulwen. I see her hands shaping the fire, her eyes fixed upon me, as if I were the forge itself, and the fire burns brighter each time I wake." Elberon frowned. "Dreams cannot harm you. She is gone." Amdir's lips curved in a weary smile. "You still think of her as something that can die. But fire has no grave, Elberon. It passes from one kindling to the next." Before Elberon could speak again, a sound drifted through the night, the low toll of a bell, faint and distant. Both men rose swiftly, listening. The sound came again, borne on the wind from the east. "No village lies that way," said Elberon. "Only the broken plains of Gorgoroth." "Then something stirs upon those plains," Amdir murmured. At dawn they rode on. The path wound upward into the foothills, and the air grew heavy with heat. Clouds of dark vapor hung low above the mountains, veiling the peaks. When night fell, the eastern horizon glowed faintly red, as though the heart of the world still smoldered beneath the rock. By the 5th day, they had reached the edge of the waste. Before them stretched the desolation of Mordor, black, cracked earth and rivers of dust. The ruins of old fortresses rose like broken teeth from the plain, their stones half buried by time. And far beyond, rising vast and dreadful against the sky, loomed Mount Doom, its crown shrouded in smoke. Amdir dismounted and knelt, pressing his hand to the ground. "It breathes," he whispered. "The fire beneath, it feels me." Elberon dismounted as well, laying a hand upon his shoulder. "Then let it feel your strength, not its own. We go to end this." They crossed the plain under a sky of iron grey. The heat rose from the earth in shimmering waves, and their cloaks grew heavy with ash. When night came, they found shelter in the ruins of an old outpost of Gondor, its walls blackened, its banner long decayed. It was there, while Elberon kept watch, that Amdir's strength began to wane. He sat apart, clutching his arm where the burn still glowed faintly through the wrappings. His breath came hard, and a sheen of sweat covered his brow. "Elberon," he said softly, "do you remember the tales of Isildur's bane? Of how even the purest heart could be twisted by the ring's call?" Elberon looked at him sharply. "I do, but that evil is gone." Amdir's voice trembled. "Is it? The ring was destroyed, yes, but its making bound the fire of Orodruin to a purpose greater than itself. The forge beneath that mountain remembers the touch of the One. It remembers the hand that shaped it. And now, so do I." Elberon reached for him. "You speak madness." Amdir's eyes flared. "Do I? Then tell me why I dream of the forge. Tell me why my blood burns when I draw near this place." Elberon fell silent. He saw the truth of it then, the faint red glow beneath Amdir's skin, the way his breath steamed in the cool air, the unnatural fire that now seemed part of him. Before he could answer, the earth beneath them trembled. A deep, rumbling sound rose from the east, rolling through the night like thunder. The air filled with the scent of sulfur and ash. Elberon drew his sword, scanning the horizon. The mountain stirs. Amdir rose unsteadily. "No," he whispered. "Something beneath it does." From the plain came a sound like the beating of drums. Faint shapes moved among the shadows. Men, dozens of them, bearing torches that burned with crimson flame. Their voices rose in harsh chant, echoing through the ruin. "The heirs of Ash!" Elberon hissed. He signaled for silence, and the two crept forward among the fallen stones. Below, they saw a company of dark-robed figures gathered around a pit of fire. At their head stood a tall man, clad in black mail, his face hidden behind a mask shaped like a burning sun. He raised his hands, and the chanting ceased. "Brothers of the Flame," his voice rang out, deep and commanding. "The time of mourning is ended. The mistress has not perished. She walks again in the flesh of her chosen. The fire has found a new vessel, and through him the forge shall live." Elberon felt the blood freeze in his veins. The man turned, pointing toward the hills, and toward them. Amdir's body went rigid. He gasped and fell to his knees, clutching his chest. The skin of his hands glowed red, and smoke curled from between his fingers. "No," Elberon said, kneeling beside him. "Fight it, Amdir!" But Amdir's eyes had changed. They blazed with crimson light. His voice came low and hollow, carrying an echo not his own. "I hear her. She calls from the fire. I cannot resist her." The cult below cried out as one. "The vessel! The vessel comes!" Elberon gripped his friend by the shoulders. "Listen to me. You are Amdir of Ithilien, son of Gondor. You are no servant of the dark." For a moment, Amdir's eyes flickered, the light dimming. "Elberon, I feel it consuming me." "Then let me bear it with you," Elberon said fiercely. "We end this together, or not at all." But Amdir suddenly broke from his grasp. Stumbling toward the edge of the ruin, he stood silhouetted against the fire below, his cloak billowing in the rising wind. "I must go," he said. "The flame within me cannot be quenched. If I remain, it will burn all you love. I will end it, within the mountain itself." Elberon rose, reaching out. "Amdir, don't!" But the wind howled, and the sound of drums swelled. The earth shook, and ash filled the air. In the confusion, Amdir turned and ran into the darkness toward the burning slopes of Mount Doom. Elberon called his name until his voice broke, but only the echo answered. He stood alone amid the ruins, the sky red with fire, the cult's chant rising like thunder across the plain. And far ahead, a single figure climbed the mountain road, his shadow long against the light of Orodruin. Amdir was gone to the fire. The night that followed was filled with dread and fire. Elberon remained in the ruins long after Amdir vanished into the eastern dark. Below, the heirs of Ash gathered in greater numbers, their torches swaying like serpents' tongues. Their chanting rose and fell, a tide of harsh voices calling upon powers long banished from the world. The very air seemed to tremble with their devotion. Elberon watched them from the shadow of a fallen tower, his heart torn between fury and despair. He could not abandon his friend, not while hope remained, but to descend into that sea of flame and madness would be death without purpose. So he waited, silent, until the moon fell low behind the mountains, and the chanting ceased. When the last torch flickered out, he descended the slope, and crossed the ashen plain, moving swiftly and unseen. The ground was hot beneath his boots, and thin plumes of smoke curled from fissures in the rock. The faint tremor of the earth seemed to match the beating of his heart. He could feel the mountain breathing, as though it hungered for what approached. By the time he reached the lower slopes of Orodruin, dawn had begun to break. A dim, blood-red light that stained the sky. The air was thick with ash. There was no bird song, no sound but the endless hiss of the wind through the crags. Then, faint and distant, he saw him. Amdir! The young ranger was climbing the mountain road, his cloak tattered, his steps unsteady. Even from afar, Elberon could see the faint red glow that surrounded him, an aura of light like the reflection of a forge. Elberon shouted, his voice echoing against the cliffs. "Amdir! Stop!" But Amdir did not turn. He climbed on, slow and relentless, as though drawn by an invisible hand. Elberon hurried after him. The path wound upward through blackened stone and molten fissures. The heat grew fierce, and the air itself seemed to burn his throat. Yet he pressed on, calling again and again. At last, upon a ledge not far below the mouth of the mountain, he caught him. Amdir turned, his eyes no longer his own. They burned with a crimson fire that reflected the molten depths beyond. His face was pale, drawn tight with pain, but within that suffering was a terrible calm. "Elberon," he said, his voice echoing strangely, as though another spoke through him. "Why do you follow? You cannot save me now." "I came to bring you home," Elberon said, drawing near. "You are not her creature. You are a son of Gondor." Amdir smiled faintly. "Home. My home is ash now. My blood is fire. You do not understand. She is within me. Morgulwen lives through me. She waits below in the heart of the mountain." "She waits for death," Elberon said. "And you shall not join her." Amdir's hand rose, trembling. "If I resist her, she will burn me alive. If I yield, she may rise again through me. Either way, Gondor will suffer. Then we will fight her together." But Amdir shook his head. "You cannot fight what you cannot see. Her will is the mountain's will now. Look!" He pointed toward the summit. There, within the cloud of smoke, a faint red light pulsed, steady as a heartbeat. The earth shuddered beneath them, and a deep rumble echoed from within the mountain's throat. "She calls," Amdir whispered. "The forge is awakening." Elberon reached for him, but Amdir stepped back. "Do not follow me, my friend. If I can end her, I must do so alone." He turned and began to climb again, vanishing into the smoke. For a moment, Elberon stood frozen, torn between fear and duty. Then he followed. The path narrowed as it neared the crater. Flames licked from cracks in the rock, and rivers of molten stone glowed beneath thin crusts of black. The roar of the fire drowned all other sound. When Elberon emerged upon the brink, the heat struck him like a hammer. The air shimmered with light. Below, the great chasm yawned, filled with liquid flame that surged and fell like a living sea. And upon a narrow bridge of rock that jutted over the fire stood Amdir. He was bathed in red light, his hair streaming in the heat, his arms spread wide as though in prayer. The glow within his skin had grown brighter, and his cloak began to smolder. "Morgulwen," he cried, his voice echoing across the pit. "You took all that was good and turned it to ruin. You forged chains from flame, and now your fire shall be your prison." From the depths below came an answering cry, a shriek like metal rending, like the voice of the mountain itself. The flames surged upward, and in their midst a figure took form, a woman of fire and shadow, her eyes twin stars of wrath. Morgulwen. You cannot unmake what you carry, she said, her voice terrible and beautiful. You are my forge reborn. Through you, I shall rise again. Amdir trembled, his body racked with pain. No, he gasped. Through me, you shall end. He drew his sword and drove it into his own breast. The blade flashed, then burst into flame. Light poured from his body, blinding and pure. Elberon cried out and leapt forward, but the heat drove him back. Amdir stood upon the bridge like a burning statue, his voice rising above the roar of the fire. By the blood of men, by the memory of the ring-bearer, by the peace of the king, I cast you down, the mountain answered. A thunderous roar split the air as the fires exploded upward, engulfing the bridge. The figure of Morgulwen screamed, her form twisting, unraveling into sparks. The flames turned white, and for a moment, the world was light. Then came silence. Elberon lay upon the rock, dazed and scorched. The heat faded slowly, and the air grew still. The forge was gone. The bridge had collapsed into the pit. He rose weakly, calling Amdir's name. There was no answer. Only the slow hiss of cooling stone. At the edge of the chasm, he found the hilt of Amdir's sword, blackened, half melted, but still whole. He knelt, clutching it to his chest. May the Valar guide you, brother, he whispered. Behind him, the mountain was quiet. The glow within its heart dimmed and died, and the first cool wind of morning swept across the plain. When Elberon returned to Ithilien weeks later, he bore the hilt of his friend's sword wrapped in white cloth. The king received him in silence, and Faramir wept. They buried the relic beneath the white tree, and upon the stone they carved only these words, Amdir of Ithilien, who faced the fire unafraid. And though peace returned once more, Elberon never forgot the look upon his friend's face, the calm before the flame, the quiet before the end. Sometimes, in the stillness of night, he would see again the faint glow upon the horizon, and hear Amdir's voice carried on the wind. The fire remembers. And in the heart of Mount Doom, far beneath the stone, a single ember glowed, small, silent, and waiting. For many days after Amdir's passing, the land lay hushed beneath a veil of ash and silence. The mountain slept once more, its fires dimmed, its smoke trailing faint and thin into the high air. Yet the shadow of what had happened there clung to the hearts of those who knew the tale. The king commanded that the eastern marches be guarded anew, and watchfires were set upon the borders of Ithilien. Still, Elberon knew that vigilance alone could not banish what lingered unseen. He returned to Emin Arnon, a changed man. The people hailed him as a hero, the one who had faced the mountain's wrath and survived, but he took no pride in their praise. The memory of Amdir's last words, the blinding light of that sacrifice, burned still within him. In quiet hours he would walk the gardens at dusk, and sometimes he fancied he could hear the faint hum of a forge deep within the earth. An echo, perhaps, or something more. One evening, as the first stars began to kindle above the Anduin, Faramir came to him. The steward's hair had turned silver, but his eyes were still clear and piercing, filled with the wisdom of long years. "You are troubled, my son," he said softly. "I see it in your face." Elberon bowed his head. "I cannot shake the thought that it is not ended. Amdir gave his life to destroy her, yet still I feel the fire. It is as if the mountain itself remembers him, and her." Faramir laid a hand upon his shoulder. "The memory of great evil never fades quickly, but do not let fear rule your heart. Sauron's shadow fell at the hands of the brave, and even his works have passed into ruin. The flame that remains may be nothing more than the sigh of dying embers." "I wish I could believe that," Elberon murmured. but the men we fought called themselves heirs of Ash. They spoke of many scattered across the east. If one cult could rise from the bones of Mordor, might not others follow? Then let us prepare for that day, Faramir said. But remember, hope is our strongest guard. Amdir's sacrifice was not in vain, and though the fire may burn again, the hearts of men have learned from their suffering. His words brought Elberon little comfort, but he nodded and said no more. That night, when he looked eastward from the balcony, he saw no fire on the horizon, only stars. Years passed, and peace endured. King Elisar's reign entered its 4th decade, and Gondor flourished as it had not since the elder days. Trade flowed again through Osgiliath's restored bridges, and the White City gleamed like a jewel upon the mountain's knee. Yet though prosperity returned, the memory of the shadow remained a scar upon the land. Few ventured east beyond the Morgai Vale, and those who did seldom stayed long. Elberon grew in wisdom and renown, and his name was spoken with honor among the captains of the realm. Still, he never wed, nor took joy in the splendor of court. His heart was bound to duty and haunted by loss. The sword hilt of Amdir he kept always near, set upon his desk where the morning sun could fall upon it. Then, one summer's eve, a messenger came from the northern frontier, a young rider of Rohan, dust-caked and pale with fear. He bore tidings that froze the blood of all who heard them. In the lands east of the Sea of Nurnen, where the slaves of Mordor once toiled, a strange light had been seen by night. The ground there trembled, and travelers spoke of voices rising from the ash fields, chanting in tongues no man knew. Some claimed they had seen figures moving through the smoke, tall, shrouded, bearing banners marked with the symbol of flame within a ring. The heirs of Ash had returned. Elberon wasted no time. Within a day, he gathered a company of the king's guard and rode east once more. Though his father counseled caution, he would not wait. If the fire stirs again, we must quench it before it spreads, he said. The journey took them many days. They crossed the Anduin at dawn, beneath a blood-red sky, and rode through the broken lands of Gorgoroth. The air was heavy and strange, carrying the scent of burnt metal. By the 4th day, even the horses shied and snorted at unseen things in the dark. At last, they came to the plains beyond Nurnen, where once the armies of the Dark Lord had marched. There they found what the rider had spoken of, a great circle of stones blackened by soot, and within it a pit that burned though no wood nor oil fed it. The flames rose and fell with a strange rhythm, and when the wind passed over them, the fire whispered as though it had a voice. One of the guards stepped forward, crossing himself in fear. "By the valor," he said. "What fire burns without fuel?" Elberon dismounted, approaching slowly. He knelt by the pit and reached out his hand. The heat was fierce, yet not like any forge he had known. It pulsed, as though alive. Then, faint and clear, he heard a whisper carried upon the wind. "Elberon!" He drew back sharply, his heart pounding. The voice had been his friend's, Amdir's. The men around him stirred uneasily, glancing at one another. "My lord?" one asked. Elberon rose, forcing calm. "Search the camp. There may be more." They found none living, but the signs of labor were plain. Tools lay scattered, hammers, tongs, and crucibles black with soot. In one corner lay fragments of metal shaped into rings, their surfaces inscribed with runes so small they seemed the work of madness. None dared touch them. "This is no mortal craft," said Elberon grimly. "Destroy it all. Break the stones and bury them deep." They worked until nightfall, breaking the black circle apart and scattering the fragments into the plain. But as the last stone fell, the wind rose suddenly, carrying with it the faint scent of sulphur and smoke. The pit flared bright, roaring like a beast in pain, and the ground shook beneath their feet. Elberon shouted for his men to fall back, but before he could move, a figure appeared within the fire, a shadow half seen, shifting and tall. For an instant, he thought it was Morgulwen, but no, it was Amdir. His form was wreathed in flame, his eyes hollow and sorrowful. He raised one burning hand and spoke, his voice like the crackle of embers. "Do not weep for me, Elberon. I am bound to the fire now. It cannot be unmade. The forge endures, though its mistress is gone. Guard the living flame. It must not fall to darker hands." The apparition wavered, the fire dimming. Elberon reached out, but the vision faded into smoke. The flames sank low, leaving only the pit's dull red glow. The men stood in stunned silence. At last Elberon spoke, his voice hoarse. "We return to Minas Tirith. The king must hear this. The heirs of Ash are not broken. They have found a new master." He looked eastward, where the horizon shimmered with heat. The stars above flickered like sparks against the vast dark. And far in the distance, though the mountain slept, a faint glow touched the sky once more, like the heartbeat of a dying fire waiting to rise again. In that moment, Elberon understood the truth of Amdir's final words. Evil could be slain, but never forgotten. Fire, once kindled, would always seek new hands to bear it. And though Gondor stood in glory beneath the rule of Elisar, a shadow crept once more beneath the mountains, quiet, patient, and warm. The return to Minas Tirith was long and heavy with silence. Elberon rode at the head of his company, but his thoughts were far away, back among the black stones of Nurnen, where the flames had whispered his name and the face of his fallen friend had risen from the fire. No song greeted them as they crossed the bridge of Osgiliath. No banners waved in the wind. The people of Gondor had learned by now that when the Warden of Ithilien returned from the east, he brought tidings that darkened the heart. The king received him in the high hall of the citadel. Elisar sat upon the throne in his silver crown, his hair streaked with white, yet his presence still filled the chamber like sunlight breaking through cloud. The light from the tall windows caught upon Anduril's edge, where it rested by his side. Elberon bowed low. "My lord, the heirs of Ash have not perished. We found their work at Nurnen, rings forged anew in secret fire. The mountain sleeps, but its breath stirs still. And I saw him, Amdir, or what remains of him." A murmur passed among the council. The king's eyes darkened. "Tell me," he said. Elberon spoke of the pit that burned without fuel, of the tools left scattered, and of the vision in the flame. When he was done, the hall was silent. At last, Aragorn rose. If this be true, then the darkness that once ruled Mordor yet seeks a vessel in this world. Perhaps not Sauron's spirit, but something born of his malice. The fire of Orodruin was no mere element. It was bound to the will that shaped the rings of power, and will, once forged, does not die easily. "Then we must quench it," Elberon said. "Once and for all, we must seal the mountain itself." But the king shook his head. "No seal wrought by men can bind what was made in the deep craft of the Valar's foes. We must seek wisdom older than our realm. The fire is not ours to master." He turned to his steward, Faramir, who stood beside the throne. "Summon the lore masters of Rivendell and the north. Send word to the Lady Galadriel, if she yet abides beyond the sea. If this fire is the remnant of the one's making, we will need counsel greater than any in Gondor." Faramir bowed, though his face was grave. "It shall be done, my king." Days passed, and messengers rode north and west. Elberon remained in the city, but his sleep was haunted by dreams of fire. Often he would wake before dawn, drenched in sweat, hearing Amdir's voice echo through the silence. "Guard the living flame." One evening, as he walked alone upon the wall of the sixth circle, he heard a voice call softly behind him. "You watch the east too often, my lord." It was Miriel, the daughter of the king, tall and fair, her hair dark as midnight. She had grown wise in the ways of healing and law, and there were few in the realm who matched her knowledge of the old tales. Elberon inclined his head. "I find little rest when the horizon burns, though unseen." She came to stand beside him, her gaze following his to the faint outline of the mountains far away. "My father says the world will never again see a shadow like the one that fell before, yet still the earth remembers its pain. Do you believe the fire truly has a will?" He hesitated. "I saw it with my own eyes, lady. The flames spoke my name. They wore the face of a man I loved as a brother. If that is not will, then it is something far worse." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "There are tales among the Eldar that the fire of Orodruin was not wholly evil in the beginning. They say it was kindled by the world's first making, a forge of creation itself. But when Morgoth came, he bent it to his purpose. What was once light became shadow. Perhaps now it seeks to remember what it was before." Her words lingered with him long after she left. A forge of creation. Could it be that the flame was not born of evil, but merely corrupted by it? And if so, could it be restored? Or would all such attempts only awaken the darkness once more? On the 7th night after his return, a messenger from the north arrived at the White City. He was a rider of the Dunedain, weary and dust-laden, but his eyes were bright with urgency. "My lord," he said to the king, "we bring word from Imladris. The last of the lawmasters there speak of an ancient song, one that tells of a flame which cannot be quenched but only turned. If the fire of Orodruin be that flame, then it may yet be guided to serve good, if the hand that holds it is pure." Elessar frowned. And what hand could claim such purity? The rider bowed his head. "They didn't say, only that the fire will choose its own bearer, as it once did when the rings were made." Those words struck Elberon like a blow. He thought of Amdir, of the mark that had burned upon his arm, of the power that had consumed him in the end. The fire will choose. When the council ended, Elberon lingered in the hall, lost in thought. The torches upon the walls flickered strangely, their flames dancing as if stirred by unseen breath. He reached toward one, and for a moment the fire leaned closer, as though it knew him. He drew back sharply. That night, he dreamed again. He stood upon the edge of the mountain, the world beneath him aflame. Out of the fire rose Amdir's figure, shining and sorrowful. "Elberon," he said, "the forge wakes. The fire seeks a master, and if none pure take it, the dark shall claim it again. You must go back. You must find the heart of the flame before the heirs do. Only you can turn it." Elberon reached out, but the vision vanished in smoke. He woke to find the torch in his chamber, burning with unnatural brightness, its flame a deep crimson gold. He knew then that his choice had been made for him. By dawn he was gone, riding east once more with only a small company of trusted men. He told no one, save Faramir, leaving behind a letter for the king. In it, he wrote, "If the fire can be turned to light, I will see it done. If not, I will see it ended. Whatever awaits in the mountain's heart, it must not fall to the heirs again." The road to Mordor lay open before him. As he rode, the wind rose from the east, carrying the faint scent of ash and heat. And far ahead, beneath the red dawn, Mount Doom glimmered faintly, its dark crown wreathed once more in smoke. It seemed to him then that he heard a voice carried on the wind, not of warning, but of welcome. "Come, heir of Gondor. The fire remembers." Elberon spurred his horse onward, and the sun rose behind him like a blade of gold, striking sparks from the dark land before him. The last journey had begun. The road to the east was long and quiet beneath the waning summer moon. The company that rode with Elberon was small, 10 men of Ithilien, chosen for their silence and strength. They spoke little as they passed through the desolate lands where once the hosts of Mordor had marched, and where the grass still struggled to return. Though the years had healed much of Middle-earth, the scars of that black realm endured. In the stillness, it seemed as though the land itself listened. For 3 days they rode through fields of grey stone and ash, where strange vapours curled low upon the ground. The air grew hotter as they neared the mountains. Each night, as they made camp, Elberon felt the same pull within him, a warmth stirring beneath his breast like a heartbeat that was not his own. It was faint at first, but with every league eastward, it grew stronger. He did not speak of it to his men. On the 4th evening, they reached the valley of Gorgoroth. There they beheld the shadow of Mount Doom rising vast and terrible against the red sky. The fires that had slept for years now smouldered faintly, a dull glow beneath the peak. The mountain seemed to breathe, exhaling heat and smoke. When the men saw it, they murmured uneasily. "The fire lives again," one whispered. "Should we not turn back, my lord? No good ever came from that place." Elberon's gaze did not waver. "Evil sleeps only when none stand watch. If we turn back, we leave it to wake alone." That night, sleep would not come to him. He sat apart from the camp, staring toward the mountain. Its crown glowed faintly through the mist, pulsing like a red heart. And in the hush of the night, he heard a voice, low, familiar, and filled with sorrow. "Elberon!" He froze. The sound came not from the wind nor the earth, but from within him, echoing deep in his chest. "Elberon, the forge stirs. The heirs have come before you. They seek to claim what remains of me." "Amdir?" he whispered into the darkness. The voice seemed to sigh, a sound like distant embers. "Not as I was. I am bound to the flame now. Hurry, before they bind it anew in the name of darkness. If they succeed, the fire will remember the shadow, not the light." Elberon rose at once, gripping the hilt of his sword. He turned to his men. "Wake! We ride for the mountain before dawn." They obeyed without question, though fear shadowed their faces. The ascent was hard and slow. The air grew thick and hot, and the ground burned beneath their boots. Great cracks split the earth, and through them the fire glowed. As they climbed, the faint thunder of hammers drifted down from above, the sound of work being done in the heart of Orodruin. At last they came upon the ruins of the old forges, black vaults half buried in stone. Within them, lights moved like fireflies in the dark. The heirs of Ash were there. Dozens of them, cloaked in grey, stood around the broken anvil where Morgulwen had once wrought her craft. They chanted in the black tongue, their voices rising and falling in harsh rhythm. In their midst burned a single great fire, its colour not red but gold, as though the sun itself had been captured in the forge. Elberon signalled his men to hold. He stepped forward alone, drawing his sword. Its steel glimmered in the fiery light. "Enough!" he called, his voice ringing through the cavern. "You have defied the king's peace. and desecrated what should have remained in ruin. Stand down, or I will end this here." The chanting ceased. Slowly, one of the heirs turned, a tall man robed in crimson, his mask wrought in the likeness of flame. "You come too late, son of Gondor," he said. "The forge is reborn. The fire remembers its master, and through it we shall forge the world anew." Elberon's eyes narrowed. "You speak of memory, but you know nothing of it. You chase the echo of a tyrant long dead." "Dead?" The man laughed, and the sound was terrible. The Dark Lord was power given shape. Power cannot die. It changes. It becomes us. He spread his arms, and the golden fire flared higher. The men of Gondor cried out as heat swept over them like a wave. Elberon held his ground, the flame reflected in his eyes. "I have seen power consume all who sought to wield it," he said. "It will devour you as well." "Perhaps," the leader said. "But first it will burn you." With a motion of his hand, the heirs struck. Bolts of fire shot from the forge, scorching the stone. The men of Ithilien rushed forward, blades drawn. Steel clashed against steel. The sound of battle filled the cavern. Elberon fought like one possessed. He cut down 2 foes and turned to face the leader. Their swords met with a hiss, the heat bending the air between them. The man's strength was unnatural, and his blade blazed red as though drawn from the very forge. "You carry it, don't you?" the man said through clenched teeth. "The spark she left behind. I can feel it in you." Elberon gritted his teeth. "Then feel this." With a cry, he drove his sword forward. The strike cleaved through the man's mask, and the fire within it burst outward in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the leader was gone, consumed to ash. The remaining heirs faltered. Some fled, others fell to their knees, crying out to the vanished flame. The forge guttered and dimmed. But Elberon felt no triumph. The fire had not died. It had entered him. He could feel it burning beneath his skin, searing his heart with every breath. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest. The world blurred, and he saw once more the image of Amdir, wreathed in gold. "The forge has chosen," the vision said. "It is yours now. Use it well, or the shadow will return." Elberon's vision cleared. His men were around him, calling his name, but he could barely hear them. He rose slowly, and as he did, the golden fire sank into the blade of his sword. It gleamed now with a light pure and steady, unlike any mortal metal. "The fire is ours," he said hoarsely, no longer bound to darkness. He turned to the forge, now cold and silent. With one final blow, he struck the anvil, shattering it to dust. The sound echoed deep within the mountain, and a wind rose, cool and clean, sweeping through the ruins. For the first time in an age, the air of Orodruin was sweet. Elberon sheathed his sword and looked to his men. "It is done." But as they descended the mountain, he could not shake the feeling that something still watched from the shadows, the lingering will of the mountain itself, waiting, as all fire waits, for the hand that will strike the flint once more. When they reached the plain below, the first rain in many years began to fall upon Mordor, hissing softly upon the cooling earth. And though Elberon knew peace had been bought at last, he felt the fire's warmth yet in his veins. For the forge was not dead. It had changed its master. The rain that fell upon Mordor was unlike any that had come before it, soft, cleansing, and cool. It hissed upon the smouldering rock and turned the black dust to dark mud. Steam rose in curling wisps from the ground, wrapping the mountain in pale mist. The land that had burned for an age began at last to breathe again. Yet for all its calm, Elberon felt no peace. They made camp upon the plain beneath Orodruin, weary from battle and climb. His men tended the wounded and gathered what little food they had left. None spoke of the forge or the golden flame that had swallowed the mountain's heart, though each had seen it, had felt the strange, pure heat that had burst forth in the moment of victory. To them, it had been a sign of deliverance, a cleansing fire that had scoured away the last stain of the enemy. But Elberon knew better. He could feel it even now, deep within his blood. A warmth that pulsed with the rhythm of his heartbeat, growing stronger each hour. The sword at his side glowed faintly in the dark, its light veiled by cloth, but alive. He sat alone upon a low ridge, watching the rain fall across the wastes. Each drop that touched his skin hissed faintly, as though striking hidden flame. He flexed his hand and saw the faint shimmer of gold beneath the flesh. The fire had not merely entered his blade, it had entered him. He thought of Amdir then, and of the voice that had spoken in the dream. Use it well, or the shadow will return. How could he, a man of Gondor, wield the fire that had once served the darkness? What light could be made from the forge of evil? The wind shifted. He looked up and saw a figure approaching through the mist, a tall man, cloaked in grey, his hood drawn low. None of the guards gave alarm, for the stranger seemed to pass like a ghost among them. When he drew near, Elberon rose, hand upon his sword. "Who goes there?" The man lifted his head, and Elberon saw that his face was old and weathered, yet keen-eyed and bright. "Peace," said the stranger. "I come not as foe. You are Elberon, son of Faramir, warden of Ithilien." "I am. And who are you to walk unbidden through the camps of Gondor?" The man smiled faintly. "A wanderer. Some have called me Mithrandir, though others named me by harsher titles." Elberon's heart leapt. "Gandalf! But you, men said you departed over the sea long ago." "And so I did," the wizard said softly. "But some callings reach even the far shores. When the fires of this world stir again, I am not deaf to their cry." Elberon bowed deeply, awe and relief mingling within him. "Then you know what has passed?" "I have seen much," Gandalf said, his gaze turning toward the mountain. "The fire has awakened once more, yet not as it was. You have done what few could, taken into mortal flesh a thing that was never meant for men. Tell me, Warden, what do you feel now?" Elberon hesitated. "It burns within me, but not with malice. It is alive, waiting. Waiting to be guided," said the wizard, nodding. "Long ago, that flame was kindled in purity, before Sauron twisted it to his will. It was meant to create, not to destroy, to shape, not to enslave. The craft of the Valar still lingers in it. You have become its vessel, Elberon. You carry a fragment of the world's first light." Elberon shook his head. "I am no smith of the Valar. I am a soldier, not a bearer of ancient fire." "Perhaps," said Gandalf, "but the fire chose you, as it chose Amdir before you. Its nature bends toward the hearts of those who would master their own darkness. Do not fear it, but do not trust it wholly. Fire is both servant and sovereign. It warms and it consumes." Elberon looked down at his hands, seeing the faint golden glow pulsing beneath the skin. "What must I do?" Gandalf's eyes softened. "For now, nothing. The forge has gone quiet. Let it sleep within you. When the time comes, you will know its purpose." He turned to go, but Elberon caught his sleeve. "And the heirs of Ash? Will they return?" The wizard's gaze drifted toward the east. "The darkness that bred them is patient. Even when the mountain was broken, its shadow fled into the hearts of men. There will always be those who seek fire for its power rather than its light. But fear not, son of Gondor. You have done what even kings could not. You have given the flame a choice. With that, he was gone, vanishing into the mist like smoke upon the wind. When morning came, the mountain was quiet. The smoke that had long shrouded its peak was gone, leaving only the bare rock glinting beneath the sun. For the first time in living memory, the sky above Mordor was clear. Elberon and his men began the long journey west. As they rode, they passed through lands slowly healing, patches of green grass among the ash, trickling streams where once all had been dust. They saw herds of wild horses upon the plain, and flowers blooming where none had grown before. At the crossing of the Anduin, messengers awaited them, bearing word that the king had sent envoys north to Rivendell and Lorien. Peace had held through their absence, and the White City awaited its warden's return. When at last Elberon stood once more before the throne of Elisar, he laid the sword before the king. Its blade gleamed with a soft, golden light, unearthly and beautiful. "The fire is quiet," he said. "The forge is gone. But this remains." The king studied it long, then looked into Elberon's eyes. "You have carried a burden few could bear, my friend. Keep the sword. Let it be a symbol not of war, but of vigilance. May its flame remind us that light and darkness are ever bound together, and that we must choose, each day, which we serve." Elberon bowed deeply. "I will guard it, my liege, as I would the realm itself." Years passed, and the tale of the heirs of Ash faded into legend. Children in Gondor spoke of it as a story of courage and fire, scarcely believing it true. Yet among the captains of Ithilien, it was said that when their warden drew his sword beneath the stars, the golden light still shone, steady, living, and pure. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind blew east, Elberon would walk alone beneath the trees and feel the warmth stir faintly within his chest. It no longer burned as it once had, but pulsed like a sleeping ember. He would look toward the mountains and wonder if the world in its deep heart remembered the first fire of its making. For though the shadow had fallen and the lands were healed, some part of Middle-earth would always bear the mark of flame. And in the quiet forge of his soul, Elberon knew the truth of Gandalf's words. Fire is both gift and trial, born to shape the world anew, or to undo it. And as long as men remembered, the light of that fire would never wholly fade. The years turned like slow pages beneath the sun. Peace endured across Gondor, and the realm of the king shone in long prosperity. The great fields of Pelennor were rich once more. The Anduin ran silver under cloudless skies, and Ithilien bloomed with green forests, where ruins had once stood black and empty. Yet though the land was healed, the memory of shadow could not be wholly forgotten. For memory lives as deeply as root beneath stone, unseen but never gone. Elberon, warden of Ithilien, grew into his strength and wisdom. His hair was touched with silver now, though his stride was unbroken, and his eyes keen as they had ever been. Men of Gondor spoke his name with reverence, and his deeds were sung beside those of his father and of the king himself. But he carried within him a secret burden, a quiet fire that no song could name. For the golden flame that had entered him upon the mountain had not faded. It lay still within his heart, calm but vigilant, a warmth that never cooled. There were nights when he would rise from his bed and feel it stirring, as though waking from slumber, whispering in a voice that was neither speech nor thought. In those moments, he would go out into the gardens of Emin Arnon, where the moonlight lay upon the leaves like silver frost. There, beneath the stars, he would draw the sword that bore the fire's light. It shone softly, gold and white, casting no heat but illuminating the shadows around him. The flame within it pulsed in harmony with his own heartbeat, and he would stand long in silence, remembering the words of Mithrandir. The fire will serve the hand that guides it, but it will always test the heart that bears it. So the years passed. One spring evening, as the orchards of Ithilien blossomed, a messenger came riding from the northern border. His cloak was torn, and his horse lathered with foam. Elberon received him at the gate of his hall. "My lord," the man said, breathless, "riders have crossed from the east, armed men bearing banners of black and gold. They call themselves the Flame-born. They claim kinship to the kings of Old Norn, and they say they come to reclaim the gift of the fire." Elberon's heart stirred cold within his chest. "How many?" "Hundreds, my lord. They build their camp in the shadow of the mountains, and their leader bears a crown wrought like burning iron." The warden dismissed the messenger with rest and food, then went at once to the chamber where the sword lay. He knelt before it, and as his hand touched the hilt, the blade flared bright as dawn. The fire within him awoke, and for the first time in many years, it spoke. Not in the voice of Amdir, nor Morgulwen, but in its own clear tone. "They come for what is mine," it said. "The fire I lent you, the light that men would bind again in chains of pride. They will not stop. You must guard it, or surrender it, and see the world undone once more." Elberon bowed his head. "I will guard it. But how shall I fight what is born of the same flame?" The voice dimmed to a whisper. "Light must remember itself. When shadow calls your name, do not answer in fear." He rose and called for his captains. By dawn, the banners of Ithilien flew again, green upon gold, the white tree of Gondor emblazoned at their heart. 200 men rode east beneath his command, bound for the borderlands, where the shadow had begun to gather once more. The Flame-born had encamped among the foothills near the sea of Nurnen. Their fires burned bright against the dark plain, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to dance like living things. As Elberon and his host drew near, a rider came forth from their ranks, a tall man clad in black armor chased with gold, his helm wrought in the likeness of a flame. "I am Mardur," the man declared, his voice deep as thunder. "High Lord of the Flame-born, heir of the Ashen line. I come to claim what was stolen from the fire of our forefathers, the living light that your people hoard." Elberon regarded him steadily. "You seek what you cannot understand. The fire is not a jewel to be owned, nor a weapon to be raised in conquest. It is life itself. You would perish in trying to bind it." Mardur laughed. "Do you think the flame loves you more than me, Gondorian? I was born beneath its light. My blood remembers the heat of Orodruin. You are but its thief." Elberon drew the golden sword. Its light leapt forth like the first ray of sunrise, casting a long beam across the field. The Flame-born flinched and murmured among themselves. "If the fire remembers you," Elberon said, "let it speak." Mardur spread his hands. "It will, when your bones are ash." The battle came swiftly. The Flame-born charged like a tide of iron, their banners blazing. Arrows filled the sky, and the clash of steel rang across the plain. Elberon rode at the front, his sword a stream of light. Wherever it struck, the dark armor of the Flame-born split as though cut by lightning. The men of Ithilien fought fiercely, but the enemy was many and zealous. The air grew thick with smoke, and the ground trembled beneath their fury. Then, amid the chaos, Mardur himself came against Elberon. Their blades met with a sound like thunder, fire sparking between them. "Give it to me!" Mardur cried, his eyes blazing. "The flame calls to its kin." "It calls only to the worthy," Elberon answered. Mardur's strength was great, driven by rage and the fever of old darkness, but Elberon's heart was steady. As they fought, The fire within him rose, bright and pure, burning away fear and doubt. The voice returned, calm and vast. Remember who you are. You are not its servant. You are its bearer. With a cry, Elberon struck. The golden flame burst forth from his blade, washing across the field in a wave of light. The soldiers of the Flameborn fell to their knees, crying out as their banners caught fire. Mardur's sword shattered, and the helm flew from his head. He fell, staring up at the sky. "What are you?" he gasped. Elberon lowered his blade. "A man," he said quietly. "Nothing more. And that is enough." Mardur's eyes widened, as if he saw something beyond the mortal world. And then he was gone, his form crumbling to ash that the wind scattered across the plain. The battle ended with his fall. The remaining Flameborn threw down their arms, their zeal spent, their courage broken. The men of Gondor gathered the wounded, and the sun rose over a field of smoke and silence. That night, Elberon stood alone upon the hill, the sword planted in the earth before him. The golden flame flickered softly along its edge. He watched as the wind swept the ashes away and carried them eastward toward the sleeping mountain. "You see, Amdir," he whispered, "the fire has learned mercy." The sword's light pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and faded. When he returned to Ithilien, he brought no trophies, no boasts of victory, only a renewed peace and a quiet understanding. The forge that had once destroyed the world had become, at last, a light to preserve it. But still, when the nights were long and the wind blew from the east, he would look toward the mountains and wonder if somewhere, deep within the earth, the last ember of the old fire still dreamed, waiting, as all fire waits, for the breath of the next dawn. Years passed quietly, like soft waves lapping at the shores of memory. The reign of King Elisar waned into the twilight of his age, and with him waned the last light of the great years of the ring-bearers. The White City stood tall, her towers gleaming in peace, her walls unbroken. But even peace has its shadows, and in every heart lies the whisper of what once was. Elberon, warden of Ithilien, now grey at the temples and solemn of gaze, lived as one who has seen both ruin and renewal. The fire that once burned fierce within him had settled to a quiet glow, a warmth that neither dimmed nor died. He ruled his land with wisdom and justice, and under his watch, Ithilien became a garden once more, its rivers clean and its woods full of song. Yet at times, when the wind came from the east, he would feel a stirring, a faint call deep in his soul, like the breath of an old flame awakening in its sleep. He had married late in life to a woman of noble heart named Idrin, and their union had been one of gentleness, not grandeur. She had seen the quiet sorrow in him, the way his eyes turned too often toward the horizon, and she had loved him, not despite it, but because of it. Together they had a son, whom they named Amdirian, for memory of the friend who had given his life to cleanse the fire. The boy grew swift and strong, with his father's dark hair and his mother's clear eyes. Yet from his earliest days, Elberon sensed something within him, a strange brightness, as though the child carried in his heart a reflection of the same golden light that once dwelled in the forge. He laughed easily, learned swiftly, and feared nothing. One evening, as the sun sank red beyond the Anduin, Elberon sat beside his son upon the steps of their hall. The boy's gaze was fixed upon the eastern sky, where a single dark line marked the distant mountains. "Father," he said suddenly, "is it true that fire once ruled the world?" Elberon smiled faintly. "Fire ruled only those who forgot that light is greater. It burned in greed and pride, not in truth. But yes, the world was shaped by it once, long before our days. And you were there, said Amdirian, his eyes wide. You held that fire. Elberon's hand went to the hilt of his sword, which lay beside him. Its edge still gleamed with that strange golden hue, untarnished by time. I bore it for a while, he said softly. But no one can hold fire forever. It passes through all things, warming, destroying, creating anew. It is older than kings, older than the mountains. The boy was silent for a time. Then he said, Do you think it's gone? Elberon looked toward the east, where faint clouds hung like smoke upon the sky. Gone, he murmured. No, but it sleeps. Fire never dies. It waits. In the years that followed, rumors began to drift into Gondor from the distant east. Travelers spoke of strange lights upon the plains of Rhûn, of voices chanting in forgotten tongues, of a fire that danced without smoke or ash. Some dismissed these tales as fancies of wanderers, but Elberon listened, and the warmth in his breast began to stir again, restless as a living thing. He did not ride to war this time. Age had tempered him, and the wisdom of his father taught him that not every shadow must be met with steel. Yet he sent scouts eastward to learn what they could. Many returned with nothing but dust upon their cloaks. One did not return at all. The king was old now, and his son Eldarion sat beside him upon the throne. It was Eldarion who summoned Elberon to council when the tidings grew troubling. They say a fire burns again near the sea of Nurnen, the young king said, and a banner has been seen, black, marked with a circle of gold. What counsel do you give, my lord warden? Elberon bowed his head. If the flame has awakened, then it seeks balance, not dominion. It may be no enemy at all, unless men make it so. I will go, but not with sword drawn. Let me look upon it with my own eyes. Eldarion regarded him long. You are old to walk such perilous roads. Elberon smiled faintly. Fire does not fear age, my king, nor should those who have carried it. And so he went once more eastward, not as warrior, but as witness. He rode lightly, with only 2 companions and his son, Amdirian, who would not be left behind. The journey was long, and the lands were changed. The wilds of Mordor had softened. Green shoots pushed through the ash, and rivers ran where once there had been only dust. Yet when they came at last to the shores of Nurnen, they found what the rumors had spoken true. There, upon a rise of stone, a flame burned in a great bowl of iron. It did not consume, nor did it smoke. It shimmered gold and white, steady as the morning star. Around it stood no army, no cult, only a handful of wanderers, men and women from distant lands, their faces peaceful in its glow. Elberon dismounted and approached. The air was warm, but not cruel. As he neared the flame, it seemed to breathe like a heart of living light. One of the wanderers bowed low. Welcome, Lord of the West, he said. We have tended this flame since the old fire died. It harms none who come in peace. It is not Morgulwen's craft, nor the air's deceit. It is the world's own remembrance. Elberon stood long before it. The warmth touched his skin, and within him the buried flame stirred in answer. For a moment he saw not a fire, but a vision, Amdir, standing upon the bridge of the mountain, his eyes filled with peace. Behind him, the light spread over the plains, turning the ash to bloom. Amdirion's voice broke the stillness. Father, he said softly, it knows you. Elberon looked upon his son, and the golden light reflected in their eyes was the same. No, he said at last, a gentle smile upon his lips. It knows us all. He placed his sword upon the ground before the flame. The light flowed along its edge, brightening, then fading until only steel remained. The bond was ended, the burden past. Let it be free, he whispered. Let it belong to none, as it was in the beginning. The fire shone brighter once, as if in answer, and then stilled. When they returned to Ithilien, the land was in bloom, and spring lay soft upon the hills. Elberon felt the fire's warmth no more within his breast, yet he felt no loss. Amdirion would inherit the warden's mantle, but not the fire's burden. In the years that followed, they said that sometimes, upon the clear nights of early summer, a golden light could be seen far in the east, glowing upon the horizon like a dawn that never rose nor set. It was said to bring no fear, no heat, only peace, a gentle reminder that even from the ashes of shadow, light may yet be born anew. And so ended the tale of the heirs of Ash. The mountain slept. The fire endured, not as a weapon nor as a curse, but as a memory of all things remade by flame and mercy. For though evil perishes and kingdoms fall, the fire of the world's beginning remains. It waits quietly in every hearth, in every heart that remembers hope. And if ever darkness should rise again, the world will not forget the words spoken upon the plain of Nurnen. Fire is not the end of all things. It is their renewal.
Дякую, що пройшли зі мною цей шлях до самого кінця. Історія про спадкоємців попелу показує, що навіть переможене зло залишає своє відлуння, і кожному поколінню доводиться робити свій власний вибір. Вибір між світлом і темрявою. Мені було важливо показати, що Мордор – це не просто декорація, а жива рана світу, яка потребує не лише меча, а й зцілення. Тож, якщо вам сподобався такий формат оповідання та лору Володаря Перснів, який я для вас зробив, підписуйтеся, ставте вподобайку. З вами завжди я, ваш Джон. Дякую за увагу.